No, Tanjavur has been acclaimed as a cultural capital in the south, as the Brihadishwara temple as the center of activity. We would like to know, as a cultural point, how Brihadishwara temple and the entire temple complex of that three temple complex worked in the history of Tanjavur or even the South India.
Brihadishwara temple is actually one temple which is not important only in context to its architectonic design, artistic merits, features, schemata of sculptures, and the gorgeous structure that it is. It is also important in respect to the Tamil traditions, cultural traditions related to dance, drama, music, theatre. Then it is also important in context of the ritual traditions of temples, the Nitya and Namitik, the two systems, ritual systems that are still practiced by many of the temples. Then the temple is important in context of the growth of architecture right from Chola period up to Maratha period. So it is like an open air museum of architecture. There at one particular site you find enormous structures which are actually able enough to exhibit the changing architectural patterns which had occurred in between Chol and the Maratha period. This temple is also important in context of compilation of Agamic literature. It worked as a temple university, and there were several temples. We know from inscriptions about 56 temples which were associated with this Rajarajeshwaram Koil, and dancers, musicians, scholars, ritualists from all these temples 56 temples belonging to Tamilkam region. They were invited here and they used to work for this temple. We also know about more than 900 temple functionaries who were working for this temple, not only for the temple well-being of the people who were living within this Chola kingdom, and especially their work was linked to cultural resource management within the sacred town that Tanjavur was.
Okay. But can you elaborate a little more about how the temple acted as a center of the cultural activities? How the dancers and the performance side and how the music flourished around Tanjavur.
Firstly, we will go by the important archaeological evidence that we have in the Natyakarna of the temple, which is above the Garbhagriha, and that forms the first story of the temple. There is depiction of different mudras related to dance, Padavinyas and Karavinyas, Kativinyas, all different forms of postures, gesticulations described actually in the Natya Shastra of Bharat Muni. They have been beautifully depicted in the Natyakarna of this temple. And this is actually we can say a very important evidence that dance as a cultural activity was linked to the Cholas. We also know from inscriptions that 444 dancers, damsels, they used to stay in a street known as Tellicheri. That was a nearby street, and they were well adept in the tradition of dance, Bharatanatyam. So, temple is very important in context of knowing what Bharatanatyam was actually. If we have such kind of depiction at Chidambaram also. But why this Chola temple is important? Because here Shiva as a dancer has been depicted. His wife Parvati has been depicted as performing the Lasya. Shiva has been depicted as performing the Tandava. And then the physical postures, their movement, their dynamism, what we term as cadence of dance, that has been depicted in a very dynamic manner. So it actually focuses on the dance tradition. Another important archaeological evidence that we have, that there is a adhisthana for the dance made in front of the main shrine, and that is an open platform which is still there, that was used for performing dance on different occasions, especially during the period of Brahmotsav. Dance was part of daily ritual, which we know as Nitya Puja, and dance was also part of Naimatik Puja. That was an annual celebration that was organized by the temple. So this had a very rich tradition. Temple preserved a very rich tradition of dance. Secondly, we find a lot of description about sculptural art and the making of temple, temple architecture, vastu in the agamic literature like Mukutagam, Kalikagam. These are some of the very important texts. And these agamic literature, they were compiled by this Brihadeshwar temple. And Karur Devar, who was the leading scholar of that period, who is also considered as the guru, the teacher of Rajraj Chola, he played a very important role in the compilation of agamic literature. We also know that apart from agamic literature, the literature produced by Nayanar saints, they were also compiled by this great Chola temple. One thing is very interesting about the tradition of literature that this Chola temple had. The two very significant texts on Kshetra Mahatmya, the sacredness and the glory of the Tanjavur Kshetra. They were also written and they were patronized by the temple. One is the Tanjipur Mahatmya and another one is Brihadeshwar Mahatmya. So these are two very significant texts which were produced by this temple institution itself. We also know about different mathas which belonged actually to Tamilkam region, and they were associated with this particular temple. Especially inscription eulogize its association with the Golaki Math, which was an important center for academic study in that period, during Chola period. And the scholars of Golaki Math, they were actually associated with this Brihadeshwar, the Rajraj Chola temple. And in association with this Golaki Math, a lot of literary works were produced here in form of palm leaf manuscripts. So the temple had very rich tradition, just not of patronizing the dance tradition, that was Bharatnatyam. It also provided perpetual tutelage to literary works which were done in Tamil as well as Sanskrit. Apart from that, we know about drama that was performed here within the temple complex, and that was on the life story of Rajaraja. It had later on become part of the ritual, and every year it was performed. And so the temple also patronized the tradition of drama, the local Tamil theatre. And we know that this Tanjavur region has been actually the birthplace of the what we call today the Carnatic music. And the important chanda and prabandha, everything that was linked to music, they were compiled in this region only. Another interesting thing is that the temple had a tradition of taking images in dana, which we know as dana pratima, which were given in charity to the temple. And why this is very significant? Because people used to give to the temple the most beautiful or the best image, which was produced by the artist. It was purchased by the then intelligentsia, the elite people of that particular period, the rich traders, and these people used to give temple all such good images in donation as charity. And so this temple also collected a very good number of images. And this is very important fact about the temple, that today we have Tanjore Art Gallery, in that we have a very good number of images which are made of bronze. And bronze casting, especially by using this lost wax technique, that has been a very popular technology in that period, a popular tradition of making images in that particular region. Kumbakonam also, till this date, it is a very important center for making bronze images. So it received a very good number of images which were either made of stone or they were made of bronze. And these images were actually been kept in the temple repository, which we know as Sri Bhandaram. So temple has a Sri Bhandaram also, which collected images which were given in charity. Then we also know that there had been provision for depositing gold in this temple, and this Chola temple, Brideshwar temple, had also a gold deposit, which functioned to some extent, it functioned like a bank. So it was not only important in context to the cultural activities of that time, but also played very important role in economic and financial management.
When it comes to the dancing Shiva and all, the idol there, the sculpture there where Shiva dances and all, whether that has influenced the Nataraja sculpture throughout the country, how the Tanjavur sculptures were, how they have influenced the Indian art scene and all. Any sort of studies have been done?
Nataraja images had been made in different parts of the country, and just a few months back I visited a very small museum in Bihar. There also we have a post-Gupta image of a stone belonging to an archaeological village where Nataraja has been depicted. But there is no doubt that the Chola masters, craftsmen, the bronzesmith, they made the figure of Nataraja very popular as far as its representation in art is concerned, and Chola's kings were a devotee of Lord Shiva. This was one of the reasons that this particular dance form was made very, very popular. There is no doubt that the Chola artists had done a lot of experiment as far as the dance form of Shiva is concerned. We find in the Kostak images, the images which are made in the niches of Brihadeshwara, there is depiction of the dancing Shiva. And as far as the sculptural representation of Shiva as dancer in sculptural art is concerned, no image in India has surpassed the glory of the image of Nataraja that is there in the temple of Gangaikond, Cholapuram. I am actually talking about the plasticity and the movement, dynamism, and the contemplated mood of Shiva that had been shown in a very, very vibrant way, in a very vivid manner in the Chola temples. So I agree with this fact that whether it is the image of Ardhanarishwara Shiva or Nataraja Shiva, these images of Shiva, they were made popular by the Chola artists. Its idioms were undoubtedly adopted by the Indian artist, and it gained popularity from one coast to another coast.
Okay. The other point is when it comes to the Darazuram, that the wheels, chariot and all. Do you think that that has influenced the Konark at any point of time?
Every temple is perceptually a ratha, a chariot. As far as symbolism of temple is concerned, temple is body of the god, and the temple is also a vahana. It is a vehicle, and we call temples rathas. In North India, you may find temples which we know as Trirath temple, Panchrath temple, Saptarath temple, and Naurath temple. So it depends what kind of projections they have and how many projections they have. So there is a very important sloka in Kathopanishad. Atmanam rathinam vidhi, shariram rath mevatu. This body is like a chariot, and Atma is like the charioteer. So this sloka is very important in context to our perception of world, our perception of body, human body, and our perception about Atma. So this philosophy was ubiquitous to entire India. The Chola kingdom, the people of Tamilkam region, they had also perceived it beautifully. People of Odisha region, they have also perceived in the same manner. So as far as its symbolic representation of Ratha is concerned, I would like to link it with the very Upanishadic perception of body and soul. Second important thing is that the temple of Konark has a Ratha, but that is a bit different in one way, that Ratha actually represents the chariot of sun god. Temple is dedicated to sun. So their Rath has been made as a temple itself is a structure like Ratha. And if you will see the perpendicular horizontal proliferation of the Konarka temple, it is bit different from the temple of Darasunam. But as far as this idiom of Ratha, this idea of Ratha, the ideology of depicting temple as Ratha is concerned, there is uniformity in philosophical concept. As far as a structural adaptation of Ratha as a structural form is concerned, we may find there is difference between the Konarka temple and the Darasunam temple.
When it comes to the three temples of Tanjavur, mainly Dharasuram, Gangaikonda Cholapuram and Brihadishwara, how do you see the architectural, the progression? Do you see that it was progressing and Dharasuram was the pinnacle of it? Or how do you see that?
It's I would like to thank you for this very good question. Firstly, we would have to see the development of Brihadishwara temple. The Brihadishwara temple actually is considered as the loveliest and the largest Chola temple. There is no doubt about it. It is the loftiest one. And as far as the Vimana is concerned, the symmetry is concerned, the balance, proportion and rhythm in architecture is concerned, Brihadishwara temple is the best temple. There should be no doubt about it. The Gangaikonda Cholapuram is concerned, I would like to focus on one particular area. In that, we find the sculptors had done the greatest possible work as far as expression of emotion and feelings are concerned. And among all the temples of Chola period, the sculptural art of Gangaikonda Cholapuram is something which is superior to all the sculptures made and represented in the Chola period temples, other Chola temples, temples belonging to Chola period. So it is the best one in terms of sculptural decoration. The third one temple, the temple of Dharasuram, we have taken, it has created a rare balance of it. The body, the height, the sculptural representation, the exquisite carving, the intricate designing, the dexterity in depiction of creating multiple columns with small images, big images, and giving temple a beautiful form with multiple kind of images, friezes, recesses, which cover the entire temple. It is unique. So it is amalgamation actually of the different sort of experiments which had been earlier been done within the Chola Empire. So these three temples are actually important in three different contexts. I would like to take it in a different way. The Brihadishwara temple is the greatest one in terms of its structural form, its Sri Vimanam, the balance and rhythm that it has created in terms of making of the spire, a large, tapering, gorgeous, incredible tower that it has. The second important temple which was made as in replication to Brihadishwara temple, that is Gangaikonda Cholapuram, but there the sculptors had shown utmost dexterity in terms of making the images and creating a kind of plasticity and vividness, vivacity in expression. And you can find a happy commingling of all such experiments in the temple of Dharasuram.
Another point I wanted to ask, when you go to Brihadishwara temple, the later additions in the temple complex, whether do you think that has gone against the structural pattern of the temple?
Again, it's a very pertinent question. Actually, when the temple was planned, it was planned for a temple, one temple with one sanctum, Ekkuta temple, and keeping in mind the sanctum and the main body of the temple, with its Mahamandap and Antarala and then even the Vahana Mandap. It was placed at the very center of the whole complex. So if you will see the prakara of the temple, it becomes very clear that the main temple was placed at the centrist position. And at that time, at Chola period, a few temples we had which had subsidiary shrines, but generally one major temple with a shrine and a large tower was made. The prakara of the temple and makes very clear that in the original plan there was only a scheme for making one particular temple. Later on, what happened? We find that in different period, different kinds of shrines were added, and it was because of the proliferation in ritual systems that had. We needed a Man shrine, we needed Kalyana Mandapa, we needed different other subsidiary shrines for other kinds of ritual performances. So these rituals, which actually are the timeless traditions linked to temple, they had to be accommodated somewhere, and it became the need of that temple management of that particular time, and probably the the patrons of Vijayanagar kings and Nayaka kings and the Marathas, they were inspired by the ritual traditions and not by the architectural requirement, and so they added a few structures. Now, in what way we should take? Of course, these additions are they don't match to the whole architectural plan that has been originally been made. It is not in tune with the original architectural planning, but they are also masterpieces of architecture. There is no doubt about it, and we will have to appreciate those architects also who discovered a place within the prakara, within the temple complex, and there they have created very beautiful temples within a given space. A large temple requires a large space for making it, but these structures, I would like to give example of the Brihan shrine. This Brihan shrine has been created and it is a very beautiful shrine. Similarly, the Nandar Subramaniam temple, that is a masterpiece of its own period, and the balance that you find in this structure, it is not as large as Brihadeshwara, but it represents its own era. So we must appreciate the spirit of that age, rather than being critical to the very idea that why they had decided for creating a temple within the prakara. We should appreciate the spirit of that land, the spirit of those artists who did their work meticulously.
तो जैसे ये कह रहे हैं कि मराठा ने किया, बाद में दूसरे लोगों ने ऐड ऑन किया, तो बेसिक फीचर्स क्या हैं जो पहले बृहदेश्वरा टेम्पल है उसके बाद जो ऐड ऑन्स हुए हैं उसमें डिफरेंस जो बन रहा है, बेसिक फीचर्स क्या हैं जिनमें आप ये अलगाव देख पाते हैं?
देखिए, जब चोल काल के जितने भी मंदिरों का निर्माण हुआ है, यदि हम उसके विकास की पूरी यात्रा के ऊपर दृष्टिपात करें तो विजयालय चोलेश्वर एक मंदिर है, और ये विजयालय चोलेश्वर को भी हम इसके पूर्ववर्ती मंदिरों से जब जोड़कर देखेंगे तो कैलाशनाथ मंदिर है जो कांचीपुरम का मंदिर है। तो एक ही साथ इस सुदूर दक्षिण में बहुत मंदिरों को लेकर प्रयोग हो रहे थे, और इनका एक क्रमिक विकास हुआ है। जो पल्लव काल का अंतिम चरण है उसमें सबसे ज्यादा जोर दिया गया है विमान को प्रभावशाली बनाने के लिए, और यह चोल काल के आरंभिक मंदिरों में से हमें दिखाई पड़ता है कि प्रत्येक राजा, प्रत्येक संरक्षक विशाल से विशालतम वह विमान को बनाना चाहता है और उसमें एक विशिष्ट प्रकार का संतुलन पैदा करना चाहता है। उसकी पहली कोशिश यह है कि वह जो मंदिर उसके पूर्ववर्ती राजा ने बनाया है उससे एक विशाल विमान वाले मंदिर का निर्माण कर दे, और यह प्रक्रिया अनवरत चलती रही है। यह बृहदेश्वर पर आकर रुकती है जब राजा चोल एक ऐसे दुर्लभ विमान का निर्माण कर देते हैं जिसके ऊपर एक महास्तूपिका रखी जाती है, और इस विमान का नामकरण भी श्री विमान हो जाता है कि यह एक अत्यंत ही विशिष्ट विमान है, और शायद इस ऊंचाई को दूसरे अन्य मंदिर नहीं छू पाए। ऐसी निश्चित रूप से राजा चोल की महत्वाकांक्षी योजना है, उसमें बात बिल्कुल कूटबद्ध थी, निबद्ध थी, वो इस दिशा में जा रहे थे। अब जब हम चोल पीरियड के अंतिम काल को देखेंगे तो समझ पाएंगे किस प्रकार मंदिरों के निर्माण में अंतर आने की बात हुई। राजराजा चोल ने 2 गोपुरम का निर्माण किया है बृहदेश्वर मंदिर में। एक केरलांतकम गोपुरम है और दूसरा राजराजेश्वरम गोपुरम है। ये जो गोपुरम है ये बड़े सुदृढ़ हैं, लेकिन ये बहुत ऊंचे नहीं हैं। विमान इनसे कहीं बहुत अधिक ऊंचा है। लेकिन एक मंदिर जब चिदम्बरम में बनना शुरू हुआ तो चिदम्बरम का जो मंदिर है वह शिव के आकाश स्वरूप को निर्दिष्ट करता है, और इसलिए उस मंदिर में विमान की आवश्यकता नहीं थी दार्शनिक दृष्टिकोण से, क्योंकि वह आकाश तत्व को रिप्रेजेंट करता है, स्पेस को रिप्रेजेंट करता है, तो वहां विमान की जरूरत नहीं थी। अब लोगों को पता कैसे चलता दूर से कि यह एक मंदिर कॉम्प्लेक्स है, टेम्पल कॉम्प्लेक्स है, प्राकार भीति इतनी ऊंची नहीं बुझाई जा सकती थी। तो आर्किटेक्ट ने एक बहुत बड़ी योजना का निर्माण कर दिया। उसने गोपुरम को इतना ऊंचा बनाया कि गोपुरम के शिखरों से ही एक प्रभावशाली मंदिर का दृश्य उपस्थित हो सके। और उसके बाद एक ऐसी परंपरा दक्षिण भारतीय मंदिर शैली में बनी जब गोपुरम जो है वह विमानों से भी अधिक विशाल बनाया जाने लगा। तो हम लोग ये सबसे बड़ा अंतर तो यह पाते हैं कि चोल काल के बाद के जो मंदिर हैं उसमें गोपुरम जो है वो बहुत ही अधिक विशाल हो गए हैं। लेकिन यदि हम चोल के काल के बाद के मंदिरों को बृहदेश्वर मंदिर के संदर्भ में देखें, जहां हम अंतर पाते हैं, जैसा कि मैंने अभी पूर्व में भी कहा कि जो श्राइन्स एक पूर्व बने हुए प्राकार के अंदर बनाए गए थे उसके में तो नए गोपुरम को जोड़ने की भी संभावना नहीं थी, और नहीं किसी भी प्रकार से विमान को बृहदेश्वर मंदिर से ऊंचा किया जा सकता था। उसके लिए एक तो स्पेस नहीं था, दूसरा वह मंदिर की स्थापित परंपरा के विरुद्ध भी होता, क्योंकि कई श्राइन्स तो आप परिवार देवताओं को बना रहे हैं। मुख्य श्राइन तो बृहदेश्वर ही रहेगा, शिव का ही रहेगा, जो अडबलन को समर्पित है। अडबलन तमिल में नृत्य के देवता के रूप में शिव का नाम है। तो सुब्रमण्य में यदि श्राइन बन रहा था या बृहन्नायकी श्राइन बन रहा था तो ये निश्चित रूप से अनुषंगी श्राइन्स थे। इनका निर्माण जो है वह एक मंडप के रूप में ज्यादा हुआ है ना। तो इनमें बहुत बड़ी ऊंचाई देने का प्रश्न नहीं था। अब हम लोग देखते हैं कि किस चीज में है। चोल कालीन जो मंदिर है उसमें कोष्ठकों में मूर्तियों का निर्माण हुआ है, और मंदिर की मूर्तियां और स्थापत्य के बीच में एक विशिष्ट संतुलन है। लेकिन बाद के काल के मंदिरों में हम क्या देखते हैं कि अलंकरण की प्रवृत्ति इतनी उसको हम कह सकते हैं कि बड़ी हो गई कि जहां कहीं भी समुपयुक्त स्थान मिलता है वहां पर उन्होंने मंदिरों के ऊपर मूर्तियों के लिए स्थान निकाला है। और मूर्तियों के निर्माण की जो परंपरा जो है वह मंदिर पे के अलंकरण के दृष्टिकोण से प्रभावी ही नहीं रह जाती है, बल्कि कई बार तो बोझिल भी कर देती है कि एक साथ एक पंक्तियों में नहीं अनेकानेक पंक्तियों में अनेक स्थानों पे पूरे विमान पे से नीचे तक जो है मंदिर मूर्तियों का अलंकरण हुआ है। यानी कि जो कलाकार था उसके पास उसने यह सोचा, कहा कि मैं अधिक से अधिक अलंकृत मंदिर का निर्माण कर दूं, और अलंकरण करने के लिए उसके पास 2-3 तरीके थे। वो मूर्तियों का अलंकरण कर सकता था, वह पुष्प और पशुओं के अलंकरणों से उनको युक्त कर सकता था, वह जो अष्टमांगिक लक्षण हैं उनसे अलंकरण कर सकता था। तो जितने इस प्रकार के अलंकरण की प्रविधियां और तरीके उसके पास थे उन सब का उसने जमकर प्रयोग किया है, खुले रूप में प्रयोग किया है। और इस तरह से अलंकरण की एक बोझिलता पैदा करते हैं, एक थकान पैदा करते हैं ये कहीं न कहीं मंदिर। और चोलकालीन जो मंदिर है वो मूर्तियों और स्थापत्य के बीच एक सुंदर समन्वय और संतुलन को प्रदर्शित करते हैं। यह अंतर है।
अच्छा, ये जो विमान बने हैं इनके साथ, इनके बनने की प्रक्रिया के साथ में ऐसा कहा जाता है बहुत सारे मिथ रहे हैं, कैसे उनका निर्माण हुआ है, उसके बारे में आप कुछ कहना चाहेंगे?
आप अपने प्रश्न को थोड़ा सा और स्पष्ट करें। मिथक मतलब किस तरह के मिथक?
उनके साथ बहुत सारी कहानियां जुड़ी रही हैं, कैसे कैसे उनका निर्माण हुआ है।
There are 2 versions, you know. Some say that the elephants,
I got the point.
हाँ।
देखिए, पहले सबसे बड़ी जो हमें समझना होगा कि जो इन मंदिरों को निर्माण के लिए तकनीकी पद्धति क्या थी, टेक्निकल उसका जो एस्पेक्ट है हमें समझना होगा। तो भारत में जो भी ये टेम्पल बने, अंग्रेजी में हम इसको कॉर्बेलिंग सिस्टम कहते हैं, लिंटल सिस्टम कहते हैं, या वेट एंड बैलेंस सिस्टम कहते हैं। तो एक प्रस्तर खंड को दूसरे प्रस्तर खंड से जोड़ने के लिए हमारे पास जो है वो क्या क्या तरीके थे जो अडॉप्ट किए गए, यह सबसे मूलभूत बात है। तो एक बड़े स्तर तक ऊंचाई देने में जो हमारे आर्टिस्ट थे, उस समय के स्थापकाचार्य थे, जो नवकर्मिक थे, वर्धकी थे, सूत्रधार थे, वो पूरी तरह से सक्षम थे और इतने ज्यादा मंदिरों के निर्माण का अनुभव था उनके पास कि वो स्कैफोल्डिंग के माध्यम से ही एक अच्छी ऊंचाई दे सकते थे। लेकिन बृहदेश्वर के लिए यह काम निश्चित रूप से चुनौतीपूर्ण था, या गंगाईकोंडपुरम में चुनौतीपूर्ण बना होगा, या कालांतर के गोपुरमों के निर्माण में, विजयनगर कालीन गोपुरम के निर्माण में बात चुनौतीपूर्ण बनी होगी। इसमें दो चुनौतियां बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। एक तो अधिष्ठान से लेकर स्तूपिका तक यह एक समन्वय को उपस्थित करना। हम आपको बताएं कि बृहदेश्वर का जो मंदिर है उसको हम दक्षिण मेरु वितंग कहते हैं, या वो दक्षिण भारत का कैलाश पर्वत है। तो उसमें एक माउंटेनियस अपील, एक पर्वतीय जो चोटी की सुरम्यता होती है, आकर्षण होता है, वह पैदा करना हमारे आर्किटेक्ट का उद्देश्य था, क्योंकि वह दार्शनिक आधार है जिसके ऊपर मंदिरों का निर्माण होता है। तो इसको एक, जब कैलाश को हम सांस्कृतिक दृष्टिकोण से और दार्शनिक दृष्टिकोण से हिमालय की सबसे ऊंची चोटी मानते हैं, सबसे महत्वपूर्ण चोटी मानते हैं, और दक्षिण भारत में एक नए कैलाश का स्थापत्य में सृजन हो रहा था। तो चुनौती स्थापकाचार्य के लिए बहुत बड़ी थी। निश्चित रूप से उन्होंने किया क्या होगा, यह कि जो प्रथम तल है, जहां तक वो सामान्य ऊंचाई में देने में सक्षम थे, वो स्टोन को कैरी करके सामान्य रूप से वो पहुंचाने में सक्षम रहे होंगे। लेकिन जैसे जैसे ऊंचाई बढ़ती गई होगी, उन्हें अपने रैंप की लंबाई को बढ़ाना पड़ा होगा, क्योंकि इसके अलावा उस समय कोई दूसरा और माध्यम या साधन नहीं था। तो इस तरह से वो एक निश्चित रूप से बैम्बूज के रैंप्स का निर्माण करते थे। और उसके बाद जो प्रस्तर खंड, क्योंकि ये एक स्ट्रक्चरल टेम्पल है, संरचनात्मक मंदिर है, तो पत्थर का जो अग्रभाग है जिसको हम देखते हैं, जहाँ पे स्कल्पचरल डेकोरेशन है, और प्रस्तर का जो पार्श्व भाग है, पीछे का जो हिस्सा है, वह पार्श्व भाग मंदिर के ढांचे में कैसे बैठ सकता है, इसको ध्यान में रखकर बनाया गया है। वह कैसे जुड़ सकता है, उसमें कई बार सॉकेट्स होते हैं, कई बार हमें स्टोन की जरूरत होती है, तो उस अनुसार उसको बनाया जाता था। और जो आगे का भाग है उस पर स्कल्पचरल डेकोरेशन है, और स्कल्पचरल डेकोरेशन पूरी जो मंदिर की संरचना में जो एक कथात्मक परिदृश्य उपस्थित करना है, एक स्टोरियोलॉजिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन है इमेजेस की, उनका कथात्मक रूप से ठीक होना जरूरी है, एक के बाद दूसरी इमेज आएगी। तो उस को ध्यान में रखकर और ऊंचाई को ध्यान में रखकर उसके भार को निश्चित किया गया है, संतुलन को ध्यान में रखकर भार को निश्चित किया गया है। फिर भी ये बड़े प्रस्तर खंड है, तो इनको जानवरों से, विशेष करके हाथी से, जैसा हम मानते हैं कि वो स्टोन को खींच कर लाते थे और फिर उसको ये मनुष्य के हाथों से ही किया गया है। मैं आपको ये बताऊं कि उस समय तकनीकी दृष्टिकोण से मंदिर के निर्माण की अपनी सीमाएं थी। हमारे पास जो छेनी है, जो हथौड़ी है, मतलब कि जो हैमर है, जो चिवजल है, उसके बाद कार्विंग के लिए छोटी छोटी और जो छेनियों का प्रयोग है, इनके अलावा कोई बहुत बड़े औजारों का प्रयोग नहीं हुआ है। तो निश्चित रूप से मानवीय मनुष्य ने उसको हाथों से उसको एडजस्ट किया है, पर जहां तक कैरी करने की बात है, वो हाथियों के माध्यम से इस ऊंचाई तक कैरी किया गया होगा, एक सुनिश्चित ऊंचाई तक इसको कैरी किया गया होगा। और जो एक रैंप नहीं, एक से अधिक रैंप्स का निर्माण किया गया होगा, ताकि, और वो बहुत चौड़ा रैंप किया गया होगा जिसमें एक तरफ से यदि पत्थर वो ले जा सके तो दूसरे जानवर उससे नीचे भी उतर कर आ सके। उसको नियमित करना अपने आप में बहुत कठिन कार्य रहा होगा और चुनौतीपूर्ण कार्य रहा होगा। एक तो इसको लेकर कई परिचर्चाएं रहती हैं। दूसरी एक कहानी है जो कि बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है कि मंदिर का निर्माण केवल और केवल कला की जानकारी से नहीं हो सकता है। जब तक उस मंदिर का निर्माता और कलाकार बिल्कुल आत्मिक भाव से उसके निर्माण में नहीं जुटे हुए, तब तक उसका निर्माण नहीं हो सकता है। एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण प्रसंग है कि एक मास्टर स्कल्प्टर वह मंदिर के भित्ति के ऊपर, दीवार के ऊपर काम कर रहा था, और उसने अपने जूनियर आर्टिस्ट को, उसने पान का बीड़ा लगाने के लिए निवेदन किया। तो राजराज चोल स्वयं वहीं खड़ा थे और उन्होंने पान का बीड़ा बनाया, और जो बीटल लीफ था, पान जो था, अपने मास्टर आर्किटेक्ट को राजा होने के बावजूद भी दिया, और वो काम में तल्लीन रहे और राजा भी उस कार्य को देखते रहे। और जब मास्टर जो क्राफ्टमैन थे, स्कल्प्टर थे, जब उन्होंने अपना कार्य समाप्त किया तो जब वो पीछे मुड़े तो देखे कि राजा स्वयं खड़े हैं। तो यह कहानी बृहदेश्वर के प्रसंग में इसलिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है कि जितना एक कलाकार का उस मंदिर के निर्माण के प्रति प्रतिबद्ध होना महत्वपूर्ण था, उतना ही महत्वपूर्ण था कि राजा भी अपने राजा के रूप में अधिकार की भावना से ऊपर उठकर कर्तव्य की भावना से उस मंदिर का निर्माण कर रहा था। ऐसी बहुत सारे मिथक और कहानियां जो है वो बृहदेश्वर मंदिर से जुड़ी हुई हैं।
The point, when it comes to the granite, the temples in granite, the national scene, what is the importance of Brihadishwara as as a granite structure, and and other parallels in the Indian sea?
Actually, a very good number of temples in India had been made by using granite, and we should be very proud of this thing, that Indian artists had handled different types of stone in the country. In Odisha, you may find that the structures of red sandstone, they have been made beautifully. Khandolite had been used. If you go to south, you may find that black stone, soap stone has been beautiful, like Holeswara temple, Chinakeswar temple of Hoysala period. There are very good temples where you find very intricate designing. So they handled with soap stone in a very brilliant manner. Similarly, we may find that all major rock cut caves in India, they are actually in the zone of basalt, and in cutting and making carvings over basalt, that cutting and carving of basalt is very difficult. So that they have even done in a very impressive manner. Granite is one stone that has been used for making many of the structures of Chola and Vijayanagar period. And apart from that, red sandstone has also been used. So, but when the stone cutters, masons used to work on granite, they had to always keep in mind that because of the nature of the stone, they had always be very, very careful about the possible flaking and chipping in the stone. While they used to strike on the stone, there was always a high possibility of flaking. So they handled granite with great dexterity, and they made images of larger size to avoid any sort of problem created by the inherent weaknesses of the building material that was being used. One thing is always important, that what kind of material is available for all these kinds of activities. So granite was available in abundance, and this was one of the reasons that it was opted as a building material. Second important thing is that for making a large shape, structure, and a structure with solidarity and strength, granite, to a great extent, granite was quite useful because it provided solidarity to the structure, and this was why granite was adopted. One reason was the availability of the material. Second, making large size images was possible by using granite. And granite, stone is also important in terms of its texture and gloss also. The effect of the stone, especially the texture of the stone, that is sometimes very impressive. So these were some of the reasons that granite was used for constructing several temples in South India.
Taking these Cholas, then Marathas and Nayaks and all, how do you see the architectural side? How do you differentiate their contributions? And
one thing we will have to very clearly understand, that Nayakas actually belong to South India, and the kings who are the patrons, they have made or they have renovated many of the temples in South India. So what they did, they actually adopted the art form which had already been evolved during Vijayanagar period. Only thing is that the structure has been made loftier sometimes. Sometimes the breadth has been increased, length has been increased, massive pillars have been made by them. They have made mandapas and corridors with multiple pillars, hundreds and thousands of pillars, especially the Nurukula Mandapa and Araikula Mandapa, which were made. They are multi-pillar mandapas. And there we find double columns has been made with large Puspa Potika. A lot of stylization has been done after during Vijayanagar period and even after Vijayanagar period. So to a great extent, Nayakas actually adopted the Vijayanagar tradition, patronized them, but Nayakas were not as powerful as Vijayanagar period, and there was some sort of degeneration also in art. The images which were made up to Vijayanagar period, they are more lively. In a Nayaka period, several shrines, you may see the Kalyan Sundareshwar temple of Madurai or temple at Rameswaram. These temples have large corridors, large mandapas, and plethora of sculptures can be found everywhere. But you cannot find the vividness that you find in Chola sculptures. You cannot find that vivacity that is there in Vijayanagar art and architecture. So there was degeneration in terms of the sculptural art. But as far as the breadth, length and height of structures are concerned, definitely Nayakas believed in structural amplification of the temple complexes. Marathas actually belong to Marathwada region, and Marathwada was one region where the Nagara style of temple was a popular form, and in some of the areas a happy commingling between the Nagara and Dravida, Besara and Dravida also things has taken place. It was because of the different rulers who ruled over this Marathwada kingdom. We have a typically South Indian type of temple at Ellora, where you find it can be considered as a meeting point of the northern Indian temple architecture and the southern Indian temple architecture. So, but in nutshell, the Marathas were who for them Chola was a Tanjore was a provincial capital, and there they had to patronize the local form of art and architecture. That is one thing. Second important thing is that till that time the imperial Mughal style of northern India, that has also become very important and prominent in the architectural structures which we have, buildings which we have belonging to 17th and 18th century. There we find some Sarsenic features also. So these Marathas had seen a cultural arena in that imperial Mughal style, the ancient Nagara style of temple, and many of the regional and sub-regional elements of art had equal significance. Once they started ruling over this Tanjore region, they had a responsibility to preserve the Tamil culture, and at the same time we find that they introduced a few new elements in the art of Tamilkal region, and it was because of the inspiration they got from the North Indian tradition of art, which has a few elements which represented the Indo-Sarsenic school of architecture. One thing is very important about the murals, that the tradition of mural actually evolved in India in 2nd century BC. And Ajanta is one representative example. I am quoting Ajanta just to make it very explicit that as far as the technical aspect of mural painting, which we know as Bhumi Bandhan, applying mud plaster and then applying fine lime coating over the wall, that actually is something which was actually evolved at places like Ajanta and Bagh, later on Bagh, and everywhere in India where we have mural which are historically, heritologically important, especially the murals of South India. they were inspired by the mural or the tradition of tempera that has evolved at Ajanta, Ellora and Bagh. So as far as the technique of mural is concerned, the mural painting of Brihadeshwara temple is concerned, it is made as per the process and technique which had already evolved long back. Now what is the difference that we will have to understand? Ajanta, Bagh, Ellora, they all are rock cut shrines, where on the walls of the temple they didn't get an uneven walls. They had a stone wall of the cave, and on that, by creating grooves and a rough surface, mud plaster was applied. Then lime coating was done, that was of rough lime, and then very lime coating was done, that was of very fine quality of lime with very fine grains. So then the painting was done, and what they did, that the color pigments were mixed up with adhesive, and then it was applied. So this was the technique of making murals in India. The murals of Brihadeshwara had been made by the same technique. The artists followed the same technique. The difference was just one. Brihadeshwara was a structural temple. As far as the tradition of mural painting in Tamilkham region is concerned, Tamil Nadu is concerned, the first great experiment was made at Kailasnath temple that belongs to the Pallava period. And there, in the small shrines, miniature shrines that had been made in the Prakara Bhiti, we have very good, there were good number of paintings. When this painting work was done on massive scale at Brihadeshwara temple, because you have a large area where the painting has been done. The artist got a very large space for himself to do this work. There we find that the painting has been done on a temple that is a structural temple basically. Second important thing is that at Ajanta, art was exclusively Buddhist. Here it is, here was a Brahmanical shrine. So the theme was different. So we find two differences. At Ajanta there was rock cut cave, and there the theme was exclusively Buddhist. At Brihadeshwara there is a structural temple, and here theme was Brahmanical. So these are the two differences that we find. Otherwise technique is same. The artists, what they did, first thing that they have tried to do, they have tried to create very effective and murals by using those idioms which we term it Ajantaism. The lining, the contours of the body, the delineation, the creating in some of the areas three-dimensional effect, showing the dynamic movement of dance in painting. For all these things, the methods which have been described in Vishnu Dharmottara Purana, they have been perfectly been followed, and it makes clear that in 10th century or 11th century, one canonical literature related to making of painting, that had been popular in different nooks and corners of the country, and even the artist of Brihadeshwara temple was well aware with the method, just not the method, but also about the very philosophical, technical aspect of the painting. As we say that there are 6 Etad Chitra Sadangakam. There are 6 different angas, limbs of painting. Rupa Veda Pramanani Bhavalavanya Yojanam Sadrishyam Varnika Bhangam Etad Chitra Sadangakam. So these 6 limbs of paintings that you find reflected by the painting of Cholas, the murals of Cholas that have been created, and as far as painting is concerned, it is Nritam Chitram Paramatam. Showing a image in dancing form with a lot of dynamism. That is the greatest success that is described in Vishnu Dharmottar Puram. And what you find that Shiva in his dancing posture has been described. Third important thing that we find that the mural painting has been considered the greatest form of art. That has been said that Kalanam Pravaram Chitram. It is a Chitra Kala, the tradition of painting and mural, that is greatest among all forms of art. So undoubtedly the Chola artist who created beautiful mural paintings based on Bharatanatyam and Shiv Puran and Agamic literature and on some of the contemporary events linked to the Nayanar saint and especially to Karur Devar, the guru of the teacher of Raja Chola. They were quite proficient in the painting tradition, mural tradition of mural painting, which has evolved at Ajanta, which has been nurtured by the artist of Pallava period, and which form was also adopted by the artist who worked at Sitanavasal, and at Brihdeshwar there was definitely the opportunity to express it in the most exuberant way. The second phase about that we were talking, that some of the paintings had already degenerated during Nayak period, and at that time there was no concept of conservation. So what the artists did in Nayaka period, that they created a painting, a new layer or a new painting over the old painting. So what we find that below the Nayaka layer there is the painting belonging to Chola period, and in some of the areas, especially in the Prakaraj, when the Marathas rules, they thought for more and more decoration. So somewhere in the ceiling, somewhere on the wall, they also did that painting. But the painting of Maratha prayers is not in tune with the tradition which existed up to Nayaka period. It is simple, flat, colorful painting.